Part 8, Chapter 15 of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, translated by Nathan Haskell Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Marianne Spiegel. "Do you know, Kostya, whom Sergey Ivanovitch found on the train?" said Dolly, after she had given her children their cucumbers and honey. "Vronsky. He's going to Serbia." "Yes, and not alone either. He's taking out a squadron of cavalry at his own expense," said Katavasov. "That's like him," answered Levin. "But are volunteers still going off?" he added, looking at Sergey Ivanovitch. Sergey Ivanovitch was busy with a knife blade rescuing a live bee from the honey that had flowed out of the white honeycomb at the bottom of his cup, and he did not answer. "Indeed, I should say so," said Katavasov, biting into a cucumber. "If you had only seen them at the station this morning. Now, what an idea this is! For Christ's sake, tell me, Sergey Ivanovitch, where all these volunteers are going, and whom they are going to fight with?" asked the old prince, evidently pursuing a conversation which they had begun before Levin joined them. "With the Turks," answered Sergey Ivanovitch, smiling quietly, as he at last rescued the helpless honey-smeared bee on the point of his knife and set him on an aspen leaf. "But who has declared war on the Turks? Is it Ivan Ivanovitch Ragozov, and the Countess Lydia Ivanovna, and Madame Stahl?" "No one has declared war, but people sympathize with their oppressed brethren and want to help them," said Sergey Ivanovitch. "The prince was not speaking here of help, but of war," said Levin, coming to the assistance of his father-in-law. "The prince means that private persons have no right to take part in a war without being authorized by the government." "Kostya, look out! There's a bee. Won't he sting?" cried Dolly, defending herself from a wasp. "That's not a bee, that's a wasp," said Levin. "Come now, give us your theory," demanded Katavasov, evidently provoking Levin into a discussion. "Why shouldn't private persons have that right?" "Well, my theory is this. War, on the one hand, is such a terrible, such an atrocious thing, that no man, at least no Christian man, has the right to assume the responsibility of beginning it, but it belongs to government alone when it becomes inevitable. On the other hand, both in law and in common sense, where there are state questions, and above all matters concerning war, private citizens have no right to use their own wills." Sergey Ivanovitch and Katavasov were both ready at the same instant with answers. "That's where you're mistaken, Bayushka," said Katavasov. "There may be cases when government does not carry out the will of its citizens, and then society declares its own will." But Sergey Ivanovitch did not approve of this reply. He frowned as Katavasov spoke, and put it another way. "You state the question all wrong. Here there is no declaration of war, but simply an expression of human, of Christian sympathy. Our brethren, men of the same blood, the same faith, are butchered. Now, we do not merely regard them as brethren, and as co-religionists, but as women, children, old men. Our feelings are stirred, and the whole Russian people fly to help check these horrors. Suppose you were walking in the street and saw a drunken man beating a woman or a child. I think you would not stop to ask whether war had been declared or had not been declared on such a man before you attacked him and protected the object of his fury." "No, but I should not kill him." "Yes, you might even kill him." "I don't know. If I saw such a sight, I might yield to the immediate feeling. I cannot tell how it would be. But in the oppression of the Slavs, there is not, and cannot be, such a powerful motive." "Perhaps not for you, but other people think differently," said Sergey Ivanovitch, angrily. "The people still keep the tradition of sympathy with brethren of the Orthodox faith who are groaning under the yoke of the unspeakable Turk. They have heard of their terrible sufferings and are aroused." "That may be," answered Levin in a conciliatory tone. "Only I don't see it. I myself am one of the people, and I don't feel it." "I can say the same," put in the old prince. "I was living abroad. I read the newspapers, and I learned about the Bulgarian atrocities, but I could never understand why all Russia took such a sudden fancy for their Slavic brethren. I am sure I never felt the slightest love for them. I was greatly ashamed. I thought I must either be a monster, or that Carlsbad had a bad effect on me. But since I have come back, I don't feel stirred at all. and I find that I am not the only one who is not so much interested in the Slav brethren as in Russia. Here is Konstantin. Private opinions are of no consequence. There is no meaning in private opinions, when all Russia, when the whole people, signified what they wished," said Sergey Ivanovitch. "Yes, excuse me, I don't see this. The people don't know anything," said the prince. "But papa, how about Sunday in church?" said Dolly, who had been listening to the conversation. "Give me a towel, please," she said in an aside to the old beekeeper, who was looking at the children with a friendly smile. "It can't be that all—" "Well, what about Sunday at church? They tell the priest to read a prayer. He reads it. Nobody understands one word. They snore just as they do during the whole sermon," continued the prince. "Then they tell them that the salvation of their souls is in question. They pull out their kopecks and give them. But why they have not the least idea." "The people cannot know their destiny. They have an instinctive feeling, and at times like this they show it," said Sergey Ivanovitch, looking at the old beekeeper. The handsome, tall old man, with his black beard, wherein a few gray hairs were beginning to show, and with his thick, silvery hair, stood motionless, holding a cup of honey in his hand, looking at the gentleman with a mild, placid air, evidently not understanding a word of the conversation, nor caring to understand. He nodded his head with deliberation as he heard Sergey Ivanovitch's words, and said, "That's certainly so." "Well now, ask him about it," said Levin. "He doesn't know. He doesn't think. Have you heard about the war, Mikhailovitch?" asked he of the old man. "You know what was read in Sunday at church, don't you? What do you think? Ought we to fight for the Christians?" "Why should we think? Our Emperor Alexander Nikolaevich will think for us, as in everything else. He knows what to do. Should you like some more bread? Shall I give some to the little lad?" asked he, turning to Darya Alexandrovna and pointing to Grisha, who was munching a crust. "What's the use of asking him?" said Sergey Ivanovitch. "We have seen, and still see, hundreds and hundreds of men abandoning all they possess, giving their last penny, enlisting and trooping from every corner of Russia, all clearly and definitely expressing their thought and purpose. What does that signify?" "It signifies, in my opinion," said Levin, beginning to get excited, "that out of 80 millions of men there will always be found hundreds, and even thousands, who have lost their social position, are restless, and are ready to take up the first adventure that comes along, whether it is to follow Pugatchov, or to go to Khiva, or to fight in Serbia." "I tell you they are not adventurers who devote themselves to this work, but they are the best representatives of the nation," cried Sergey Ivanovitch, excitedly, as if he were defending his last position. "There are the contributions. Isn't that a test of popular feeling?" "The word people is so vague," said Levin. "Long-haired scribblers, professors, and perhaps 1 in 1,000 among the peasants understand what it is all about. But the rest of the 80 millions do as Mikhailovitch here does. They not only don't express their will, but they haven't the slightest idea that they have any will to express. What right, then, have we to say that this is the will of the people?" End of chapter 15.